This is a disclaimer. This podcast features 4 professional idiots who share their insights and anecdotes. This podcast is intended for entertainment purposes only. This podcast represents the opinions of the guests and should not be taken as medical, legal, or professional advice.
Welcome back, everyone, to Overqualified Idiots. I'm Dan Casey, MD. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is a show where a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, and a pharmacist come together to tell stories, share opinions, ideally make fun of each other, and shoot the breeze. If this is not your first time tuning in, welcome back. I'm so happy that we're recording again. I've missed this because we've had some pretty crazy... I've had a crazy month, as I will talk about next episode. Kind of cover that topic. But today we got a banger of a topic I'm pretty excited for, and let me introduce my co-hosts, or co-professionals, co-idiots, whatever we want to call each other. First and foremost, I want to introduce Alex JD, Alex Esquire,
Hello.
Who just graduated law school, that one.
Yep. Now that I have graduated from law school, I am a lawyer, but not an attorney, because, we gotta specify. I gotta pass the bar exam before they allow me to be an attorney. Apparently, I looked this up a little while back. Apparently, attorney comes from some French phrase that means something along the lines of like to represent. And so I am a lawyer, but I can't represent anybody. I can't be an attorney because I'm not licensed. So that's the thing.
That is some pedantic bullshit.
It absolutely not, but
There's some nuance. All right, so wait, so what is your title then? Are you JD still?
yeah, I'm JD. Yeah, I have.
I figured. Yeah, because that's what makes you a lawyer or lawyer. I heard somebody call it lawyer the other day, and it made me kind of turn my head because I'm like, it's probably still technically correct, but it sounds wrong.
There's as many accents as there are, people who want to pronounce things in silly ways, and I endorse all silly pronunciations.
Like buoy and buoyancy. Should be a boy.
Yeah. I try not to make fun of people too much, but I do laugh at it. I try not to make fun of people for mispronouncing things, especially in medicine, because it just means they learned it by reading, and I don't read, so it's fine.
So does that mean the guy from Scrubs was a lawyer and a doctor?
Which character are you talking about?
If I say it, it ruins it. But okay, JD.
Damn it.
Oh, oh my God.
Actually, I know a guy in my graduating class who is now a lawyer and is also still an MD. So those exist.
Yeah, it's one of those things. You can get an MD and not be a practicing doctor. A lot of people will do it to get their MBA and go into health administration, which blows my mind because med school is the hardest form of school I can imagine or have ever seen.
Yeah, it sounds awful.
Yeah, so some people do that, and that's their plan, and I'm like, oh my God, that sounds awful.
Yeah.
So, also, as you've already heard speak, we have Bengineer joining us. Ben, say hi.
Hello.
That's who you are until you die to me. I die. Whoever dies first.
We can decide that over a knife fight. It's fine.
Yeah, all right. let's go, man. Let's see. The knife will probably even the playing field for you, because I don't think without the knife you got much of a chance.
I kind of vote for a joust, but whatever you guys want to do.
Oh, jousting. That would be a good way to settle a disagreement, because it doesn't necessarily have to be lethal.
No, it also doesn't have to necessarily be on horses.
I just picture shopping cart jousting, something out of
office chair,
something out of Jackass. Yeah, office chair jousting. Oh, that's great. It's a good visual. And as you guys heard just now, we have PJ, our PharmD, joining us.
Hello.
Very nice. The gang's all here. I don't think have we had this particular group recording? I think we actually did, but I think it was episode 2 of season 1, so it's kind of fitting
something
that it's
like that.
It's episode 2 of season 2 now. It's the exact same group, I think.
Yeah.
With our rotating cast and whatnot. But yeah, thank you guys for being here. I'm really hyped for this. So as a kind of preamble to introducing the topic for today, I kind of wanted to ask you guys some questions. I'm going to ask you, let's start with Alex. What's the most barbaric, brutal, old school medical treatment you can think of?
I mean, so
if you had to pick one.
I'm thinking of lobotomies. Lobotomy is probably the thing that comes to mind.
That's where my brain went.
Yeah, lobotomy is a good one. Ben, how would you pick a different one?
My brain also went to lobotomy. I mean, electric shock therapy.
Okay, yeah. So
stay on psychiatric treatments.
There you go. That's a good one. PJ, what about you? I want you to pick one.
Yeah, I will. But I like the fact that Ben's brain went to lobotomy. I like that.
We'll explain a few things. Just kidding. That's mean. I'm sorry.
I was thinking of leeching, but I think they still do that. I think.
Okay, leeching. All right. And then my brain went to bloodletting. So out of these four, which of these, and I'm going to have each of you guess, I'll go down the same line. Which of these do you think are still done today? Alex, I'll have you go first.
Of the ones that we just listed?
Yeah. Which of these do you think are still done as a standard of care or best practice in medicine?
I know that electroshock is done in certain circumstances. I'm pretty sure that's done.
So that's the one you're going to pick?
Yeah, I think electroshock is still done.
Okay. Ben, what one would you pick and say is still actually a practice?
I'm pretty sure lobotomy is like outlawed by international law. Okay, maybe not international, but the whole being ethical. So leeching,
but like the Geneva Convention. Yeah. Okay. So leeching
probably?
is leeching still done? And are you cheating? Because that's the one that PJ was like, oh, this one's still done, so I'll go with that.
No. Well, I mean, Alex and I also picked ones that are like pretty old school barbaric.
Yeah, pretty barbaric. And PJ, which one would you pick and say is still in practice?
So leeching, but you also said standard of care. I'm not sure if it's standard of care, but I've heard of it being done.
Yeah, so this is a bit of a trick question, and the answer is all of them are still used today for various things. It's obviously, and lobotomy, maybe not in the old school sense of disconnecting parts of the prefrontal cortex, but there are forms of psychosurgery.
You're talking about like the corpus callosum severing?
Yeah.
Or like remove
there's actually
seizures?
There's multiple forms of different psychosurgeries where they are disconnecting different parts of the brain to basically treat certain psychiatric disorders. Most specifically, obsessive compulsive disorder is the one that comes to mind for me. So I wanted to talk about the topic as kind of this little preamble of just like, aha, I got you. Of how the hell is that still a thing? How is this still done in our respective fields? So for me, all of those practices, like you said, they're old school, they're barbaric. In what setting are any of those like indicated or done? PJ, you brought up leeches. What do you know about leech therapy?
I read on it like a while ago. It might have been like maybe to take out a certain kind of poison or like a snake bite or something. I don't remember the whole thing, but something along those lines.
I don't believe so. I just can't comment on it. But I will say this. This comes a story from Nicole, my wife. She was working in the hospital. This was either pre-pandemic or like right at the beginning of the pandemic. She was working in the hospital. It was kind of a scary setting, but she had this really interesting patient who had basically lost their finger in some kind of mechanical job machine. They like clean cut lost like the distal half of like their index finger. So a pretty important finger. They had gotten it, put it in ice, took it immediately to the hospital, and the surgeons are like, okay, let's see what we can do. They reattached it. And this is what blows my mind. PJ, I don't know if you've ever gotten a prescription for medical leeches, but that's a thing. They have medical grade leeches, and what they do is they put them on, essentially like remove digits, or in some cases like really, really bad vascular disease where they're trying to improve blood flow, to basically get that blood flow established, and they'll attach leeches to the end of that reattached finger so the skin doesn't become necrotic and actually gets blood flow to it. So that was wild. I didn't know that was a thing until a year or 2 years ago.
The minute you said like improved blood flow, my jaw just dropped because I'm like, oh, holy crap, that would work.
Yeah. If you just have constant suction and pulling blood to the area, it makes sense.
Well, and I think leeches also have like natural like compounds they secrete that like thin your blood a little bit to make it easier to pull through bunch of other things that they just
That's
are naturally doing that make
insane.
perfect sense for this.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of toxins and venoms. Like you think of rattlesnake venoms, their venoms will actually cause clotting. And then basically, if you think, I'm guessing mosquitoes. I don't actually know mosquitoes for sure, but like you said, leeches have anticoagulating properties. So yeah, they want to improve blood flow. They don't want you to clot off. So it actually helps to improve blood flow to that tissue. So that's wild to me. I didn't know that was a thing. I should have, probably, because it was like cool and new, but I just hadn't encountered that in my training. And then we brought up lobotomies. I talked in a little bit. I don't have any good stories. It's just that like they will remove parts of the limbic system or parts of like, I don't think the hippocampus, but I have to look into it. It's been a minute. You basically treat, severe OCD, disconnect parts of the brain to help treat really, really, refractory schizophrenia. It's not first line treatment. Obviously, nobody's cutting into somebody. That was like a popular practice in like the 1930s through the 50s when insane asylums were a thing, and they just didn't know what to do with these very ill people.
Well, just scramble your brain. It's fine.
Yeah, it just made people docile and apathetic. So it's better than, I guess, violent and unruly. But you brought up shock therapy and how it used to be treatment for, well, not what it was meant for. But there is forms of ECT and essentially medical grade shock treatment for severe refractory depression and severe refractory anxiety. And it actually has really good data and really good outcomes. Arizona's kind of a pioneer of really weird things. I talked in a previous episode how it's kind of the Wild West in the psych realm. Well, the nice thing about being the Wild West is they can do a lot more, and they can basically do these treatments, and the regulations aren't quite there for it, and the evidence is surprisingly good. I think there's also some really good evidence and data for ketamine treatment of depression, like microdosing or dosing ketamine for instead of just SSRIs or SNRIs. I'd have to look into the research to talk about it, intelligently, but it does sound like a good time, so it'll probably improve my mood.
Oh, I should have changed my answer to experimenting with unknowingly dosing with LSD.
Yeah, psychostimulants.
That is very not a thing anymore, because it's straight up been outlawed and was the Wild West of the 70s.
I'd have to look into it, but I know there were studies done that are pretty... It's just like the doses they use were gargantuan.
Were they really?
Yeah. And Alex, what'd you just say? I missed it.
This Project MK Ultra was one of the big ones where they dosed a bunch of soldiers with LSD on a military base.
Yep, I remember reading.
Yep.
I've read about that.
There's video out there of like them stumbling around.
Yeah, they were literally trying to make like Captain America, like for real, basically.
I think they were like thinking like psychic power or some weird nonsense. I honestly don't remember, but that's what I choose to believe. I think like the Men Who Stare at Goats is very loosely related to that, or like is that? I know. Wait, you know what? That's a different insane military project. Never mind.
There's a lot of them if you read deep enough. I mean, shoot, what's the biggest violation of human rights was like the Tuskegee Airmen experiments. That just immediately comes to mind for me. So yeah, the military did some very unethical things at multiple times throughout history. It's not terribly.
Funny that.
Yeah, what would you have to say?
Just what the military doing unethical things.
Oh yeah.
Also, one of my favorites is that to get a private pilot's license, currently, you cannot pass a medical if you are on any stimulants, which are treatments for like ADHD, that kind of stuff.
Makes sense.
However, in World War II, they gave the Air Force pilots these drugs that would improve focus and keep them awake.
I just read that they ate lots of carrots and they had really good eyesight.
Yeah, so the fact that the Air Force dosed their people with probably Ritalin or something, but these days you can't get a private pilot's license if you're on it is ridiculous.
That's going to be a great segue into Alex's section of the topic, because the last thing I wanted to talk about, none of you said bloodletting. None of you picked bloodletting. Bloodletting out of all of those is probably the single most common one still used, and it's used for a very specific condition. PJ, do you know it?
I don't.
Hemochromatosis. It just means that basically people hold on to too much iron, and they always have an elevated hematocrit. They always have elevated blood levels. So they have thick blood, thick, slow-moving blood. And those increased iron levels can like damage your liver. They cause other problems in addition to just having thick blood. So the answer is get rid of your blood. So people with hemochromatosis are literally prescribed donating blood, and that's the treatment.
Oh.
To my knowledge, there's no cure, so they just get rid of the blood.
It's not bloodletting, like in the old sense of we're going to reduce your humors or whatever.
Right, we're not trying to balance your fluids. It is, but by definition, that is bloodletting. It is.
You're not wrong. You're giving blood.
Yeah, you're just not letting the blood hit the floor and be wasted. You're just that's useful. Let's use that for something.
Exactly.
Also to treat you.
Waste not, want not. So and that's just touching on like 4 common ones. I mean, there's other ones like bee sting venom used for chronic pain patients. There's maggot therapy for wounds that are infected and won't heal.
Oh, that one I knew about.
Yeah, I will say the most scarring. I'm gonna give a little like
disclaimer.
Thank you, that word. Good Lord, my brain.
Content disclaimer.
Yeah, to listeners, if you got a weak stomach or you don't like gross things, I'd just skip ahead by about a minute. But one of the most scarring stories I had in residency, early in residency, I mean maybe my 3rd or 4th month, was we had a patient come in who had surgery on her leg, and she was homeless, and she had had surgery on her leg like 2 months ago or 2 months before that. And she came in due to worsening pain of the leg. And she had been homeless this entire time, hadn't followed up with her doctor. And when I go in and we look at the leg, and I'm like, man, this wound looks weird. It's like essentially an incision from her like ankle up to her knee. And I was like, wow, it looks really weird. Why? It looks like it's bubbling. And I look closer, and it is hundreds and hundreds of little baby maggots.
Oh.
And we were worried that she was like borderline septic, meaning she was like likely had an infection. And kind of skipping ahead, we cleaned it all out, and I didn't, but wound care did. Treated her, got her better. Those meds probably saved her life, because that wound would have been horribly infected, and oddly enough, that essentially is the treatment for a wound that's not healing and is infected. So, or it has a use in medical. In the medical realm. So that is wild to me. That it was just crazy how I was like, oh, why does it look like your leg is moving? Oh, that's because it is. So anyways, all right, listeners, this is the part where you can start listening again if you have a weak stomach.
That was about a minute, so you're good.
All right, cool. So yeah, that was one of the more jarring moments of my training. But Alex, Ben briefly talked about how is that still a thing? Wild, the military does something unethical. What do you have, or in your field, in terms of things of oh my God, that's still done, or how is that still a law, or why do we still do that in the courtroom?
So I mean, there's as many of those things as you would like to point to. I mean, there's so many weird things that we still do. There's just kind of okay, that's weird. I understand why maybe that's still a thing sometimes, but sometimes it's just outdated and we just haven't come up with a better strategy, but it's kind of out there.
Haven't come up for a better strategy than using Latin?
Yeah, medical and law have that in common.
Yeah, they really do. And those are the only two. Weird.
This is about civil litigation. So if I sue you for money, Dan, say that you hit me with your car, and I sue you in order to get you to pay for my medical bills and for my time away from work. So recovering my income, pain and suffering, all those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
Who pays for my attorney?
The losing side?
No. That is the English rule. That is the rule in almost every other country in the world. It's the norm. It is almost everywhere else how they do it. The losing party foots the bill for the attorneys. The logic being behind that if you're in the wrong, then you're the reason the litigation needed to happen, and therefore you should foot the bill for that as well.
Oh, I see. So the American rule is you pay for your own attorney's fees.
You pay for your own attorney's fees regardless, except in a set of exceptions. And here's where I think we get kind of outdated, is that we have basically an almost endless number of exceptions to this rule, but they're just kind of like a patchwork of things that we've just kind of decided over time. Like, yeah, we'll make an exception in this case. So like the 6 exceptions that I was able to find that they do is for contracts. So if I sign a contract with someone else and we agree in that contract that like, okay, I'll take care of the attorney's fees in the case of a dispute, or we'll split our attorney's fees evenly, or we'll do arbitration or whatever else. That's one way you can control it. If you're trying to establish a common fund, so if you've heard of like class actions, sometimes if you're trying to like put together a common fund to help lots of other people who were injured, who were members of that class, who might come to you later, they're not going to make the losing party pay the attorney's fees on that, or they're going to make the losing party pay the attorney's fees on that, because like the whole point is to create money to help people, to help other people. It's not even for the benefit of the person paying for the attorney.
So that'd be like any class action.
It's a lot of class action.
I see. Isn't there one exception too, where if like a case is dismissed, parties can seek reimbursement for legal fees? Isn't that a thing?
You know,
as another exception.
When this kind of thing happens, we're just going to put it in statute, in a law, basically written by a state legislature, or sometimes a federal legislature too, that says, oh, in these circumstances, we'll also say that the losing party pays the cost, or that this particular party pays the cost. And those are fee-shifting statutes. And so
there's just an endless number of asterisks next to this.
Exactly. Yeah. It's almost like hearsay, like the whole thing. I'm sure that I haven't heard the episode yet, but I'm sure that your brother Pat was talking about hearsay exceptions or hearsay all throughout that whole thing.
The funny thing is there was so much to talk about. I don't think we actually touched on that as much. Yeah. But we did talk about how defamation is so hard to prove because there's so much hearsay.
Yeah. No, I mean, inherently. But yeah, the American rule is kind of like the hearsay exception, where like it's an exception, it's a rule, but the number of exceptions has just created this insane patchwork where you're gonna have to like triple check everything to make sure that like you can't get them to pay your attorney's fees through some cockamamie argument that, well, actually we fall under this particular statute, Your Honor, and therefore they should have to pay our attorney's fees, or just any number of other things.
So then why is it a rule anymore if there's so many exceptions?
There's tons of exceptions, but that's the thing, is like maybe they should uniform the law at this point and just say, okay, the norm is the other way, and only in situations of like bad faith where someone's just like being filing frivolous lawsuits or things like that, then we'll make them pay for their own. But then they'd still be the losing party. So you know what? I mean, yeah, never mind. It's just a dumb rule. It's just a silly rule that we did for some reason.
I didn't know that, because I always thought of the English rule, and I didn't realize we had our own set way that no one... Yep. Sounds like it's not very commonly done, because it's not a rule we hold very strongly.
I think Canada might do it, but I think they actually do use the English rule. I mean, I think they do. So yeah, I think there's almost nowhere that uses the American rule except America.
Well, isn't that just America standing out? Us and, oh my god, I can't remember what other country. There's one other country that also uses... not the metric system, but oh my god.
Imperial?
Thank you. God, I am struggling today. Word finding. It's just the strokes, I guess. So, but yeah, are there other examples? Because that's a good one. I didn't know that one.
Oh, I mean, that's one, as far as like other weird things, like we can always go with like the crazy laws, like you can't own a camel under certain circumstances in Arizona because of some like weird shit that happened back like 150 years ago.
Wait, is that real?
I don't remember the exact wording of it, but I think there is some rule that certain municipalities in Arizona have specific rules that you cannot own a camel there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you can just Google weird laws in each state and something like comes up. I think Alabama has one that stood out to me. It's like illegal to impersonate a priest. And that one's not as weird to me as it is just like, I thought that'd be illegal in more places.
You'd think. I mean, we can go to some of like the weirder ones. As far as like, I can't remember if it was Mississippi. I want to say it was Mississippi. That was one of the only states that had never ratified the 13th Amendment, or it might have been the 15th, giving the right to vote to African Americans. Yeah, and
I'm sorry.
Yeah, They didn't do that until like the mid 2010s or something like that, and like till 2010 kind of timeline.
What state was this again?
Mississippi, I believe.
Oh, that's not shocking. Okay.
Yeah. But because only 3/4 of the states technically need to ratify, like it just sits at the other state legislatures until they decide, we'll ratify this, other than constitutional amendments. And this is why some of you out there who do read your constitutions, you'll see some of the like amendments will have a clause that say is if this particular amendment is not adopted within 7 years, then it shall be void within 7 years of a certain timeline. It's so that there aren't just like amendments waiting to be approved by a bunch of radical states one by one by one. But it's a weird vestige. That's another weird one.
Yeah, I still love Arizona. I mean, you spent time in Arizona. You've heard of the stupid motorist law, right?
No, I have not heard of this.
Oh my God. So here's the thing is the stupid motorist law in Arizona, it actually makes a lot of sense. It's not a weird law. It's just weirdly appropriately named in that that's the official title of the law. It states any motorist. Basically, Arizona is a desert. We all know this. Mm-hmm. What most people don't realize is that Phoenix, to a lesser extent, but mostly Tucson, were built with no drainage or city planning in mind when it came to rain. Because rain's very rarely a problem. We really only get it during monsoon season, and monsoon season's very fickle. So some years, we have, 15 inches of rain, and it's basically spread out over 6 days at different points in the year, and other times we'll get all of that in one night on, monsoon season. And so the stupid motorist law is anyone who becomes stranded after driving around barricades in a flood zone will be charged the full cost of their rescue and impounding. And Go ahead.
I will add, it's also because Arizona, and specifically Phoenix in this one, our ground has a layer of very, very dense clay pretty close to the top, so water doesn't soak in, it just flows. And this is true of any wash. It doesn't even need barricades. If you go into a wash thinking you can get across while there's water running and you get stuck, you pay for your rescue.
It happens more than you think. It happens at least a couple times a year in Tucson. And it's weird only in the namesake. It actually makes a lot of sense in terms of the city, and if you've lived here for more than a day. The stupid motorist law. I just love that. I love that about our state. This is weirdly honest.
I also thought it was awesome in Tucson. There's like a city or a street that kind of like snakes around Tucson called River. I'm sure Dan's been there.
Yes, yeah. River's a pretty windy street.
And that was always the first one to turn into a river as soon as it started raining.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was next to a river. It's called that because it's next to that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's basically dry year-round except monsoon season. But there will be those 1 or 2 days we get random-ass 10 inches of rain because the monsoon decided and the entire street is flooded. And there's nowhere for it to go. It doesn't drain anywhere. It just sits there until, the sun evaporates it again. But I just feel like every state has those weird, how is that a thing? Why is that a thing? Sometimes it makes sense. That one makes sense. But I feel like a lot of them don't. So, Alex, did you have any other topics or anything?
No. I think we can cut it off there. If you let me just go, I have an endless list of things that
We'll tell you 1 or 2 more because we still got time.
Oh goodness! All right, this is a minor nitpick, but this is one that kind of bothers me just because I find it offensive to my sensibilities as a writer. Whereas clauses in laws. Get the hell out of here, guys. It's literally the way you properly read those sentences to anybody else who is dumb like me and walked into this with no policy experience, walked into the law as a field without that kind of background. Just ignore it. Pretend the whereas doesn't exist because it will only confuse you as to why it is there. Apparently, it is common practice in a lot of legislatures, and I came across this for the first time when I was looking for a bunch of EU laws, but it's true in a lot of legislatures in the United States as well, where what they'll do is at the top of a particular bill or the top of a particular resolution or thing that they're passing, there'll be a bunch of statements that are whereas this thing is a serious problem in this country or in this county or in this place. whereas this thing, this thing, this thing. It is literally just the legislature saying, these are facts about the world, and this is the reason that we're passing this law.
Well, I get that that's background and context, but you don't need that for the law.
Well, it's useful. It's actually useful, and I wish that the federal level would do that a little bit more, because a lot of courts kind of need to know, like, wait, why were we passing this law, when they're trying to interpret the purpose of, like, trying to make it,
Sure, that makes more sense.
But just like the wording of it, just the very fact that they decided that for some reason, when we're stating this list of facts, oftentimes in bullet point form, every single one has to start with the phrase "whereas," and I just don't. There's no point to have it. It does nothing.
It's just convoluted,
being weird. And the first time that you start reading them, you look at these sentences, and it's like, "Whereas this and this." Right, but whereas is meant to compare things, isn't it? So where's the comparative statement? What's happening here?
So that just
God, now that you mention it like that, oh God, I hate it.
It makes my brain crawl a little bit. And like, I understand, like, to anybody out there who thinks I'm just dumb, trust me, I understand that technically you can just ignore them, but like, I can't unsee them, and they just hurt me every time I read them. Why do we do it? It serves no purpose.
It's just convoluted. It's just like custom. It's those traditions that won't go away. Are there any traditions or things in the court proceedings themselves? Like, for example, obviously, Pat talked about this a bit, how so much of court proceedings went to online with COVID and whatnot. Are there any things like back in the courthouse in real proceedings that you're just like, why the hell are we still doing this?
So honestly, I will say that having taken courses in civil procedure and things like that, they give you, if you dive into it, there are pretty good reasons for a lot of the things that we do in terms of like how you interact with the court, the limitations on how you can interact with the other party, all those kinds of things. They actually do make pretty good sense. If you want to look at proceedings where things are a little bit more like over the top ridiculous in a similar kind of way to the whereas stuff, look no further than, I believe they're called Robert's Rules of Parliamentary Procedure, which are the rules that our Congress follows, as well as like a lot of other organizations you may have heard of. Just the convoluted ways that they organize like things and make everything so slow and specific, and like all the procedures involved with that.
Oh my goodness! September 2020, the 12th edition of Robert's Rules. Jesus, I wonder if that took COVID into consideration, since it came out 8 months after the pandemic, 9 months after the pandemic.
It's entirely possible, but they try to update them, but they just are very inherently old-fashioned.
So it's like rules of evidence, how to make a motion, like the court, like the procedures. Is that
no? Robert's Rules is not for courts. It's for parliamentary proceedings. This is what state legislatures would use.
I see. Okay.
And of course, the legislatures are the ones that are wildly out of step and outdated compared to other things, whereas courts actually have to justify, like, because otherwise a higher court looks at what they did and they're like, wait, why are you not following the rules, guys? We set out these rules for a reason.
Fall in line.
Whereas the legislature, no one has to care if they get things. They get voted out in theory sometimes, like whatever.
Maybe.
Yeah. No. And then the stupid thing tends to just sit there and be kind of a dumb parliamentary procedure that we just all have to kind of live with. No.
Well, we don't have any politicians to ask why things are still slow and dumb, but I'm sure that they'd probably give us a non-answer anyways.
It's just the way that a representative democracy works, is what I've heard.
Slow and slow-moving. So, Ben, I figured you were going to probably be the star of this episode to some degree. What are, I don't know, outdated tech or things in rocket science, things in technology as a whole, where you're just like, oh man, thank God the public doesn't know about this. How is this still a thing?
Okay, so I don't know about, like, outdated, but just, okay, so how do you think that there's a whole bunch of stuff zipping around in orbit around the Earth? How do you think that all is tracked?
Oh God, is it not? I'm assuming there's some capacity.
Fortunately, that's not the answer. Okay. That would be very bad.
I just know there's tons of like space debris and space waste, so to speak, that's becoming a problem when you start talking about orbits and satellites and whatnot, but I don't know how they're tracked. How are they
I
tracked?
think they are planning to start centralizing more of that, but there's a bunch of different groups that track satellites under different for different
Correct.
things, and they don't necessarily
Correct,
all
but
talk to
there-
each other, which is half the problem, right?
There is a central repository
is, okay.
that's supposed to be the end-all be-all. It is the Air Force, and they use these things that are rooted back from the ages of punch cards
Oh no!
called two-line elements.
Oh my god, what does that mean?
I will put an example of a two-line element up. People can just Google them if you're not driving. They're just numbers. They're just numbers. All the numbers mean things, but they just characterize orbits. But we've never gone through and updated this system because the Air Force doesn't want to / it's just how it's been done.
Oh my god, you posted it in the Discord. Is this just essentially mathematical educated guesses is where they're at?
Fortunately, they're not educated guesses. With these numbers, I'm kind of burying the lead a little bit because of how orbits work. You can do what's called propagating them if you know a set of initial conditions and how things are changing. So with these, you can punch it into a program and technically get the last known orbit of these things because you have when did it happen, how fast was it going, and various things about the orbit. But it just looks so archaic.
This looks... Oh my god, this looks like it hurt my brain.
It looks like this is going to be a throwback. It looks like a library Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah. I just don't know what half these words and numbers are. Argument of perigee, mean anomaly, mean motion.
Second derivative of mean motion, usually blank.
Usually. Sometimes it's not. Oh no. What the hell? So wait, what's the reference point? Do they use longitude and latitude to be it's over this point in the Earth? Where the hell?
Oh, that's a whole different thing. There are 6 different types of systems you can use for what they are standardized, but it's
I'm trying to think. Is second derivative of mean motion the acceleration on the satellite?
Yeah.
Okay.
Should be.
Okay.
But usually blank because usually
be
things
zero.
aren't accelerating.
Yeah. Hopefully your satellite is not changing its orbit actively.
Oh god. My head hurts looking at this. So this is how they do it. This is just some company or centralized...
No, it's the Air Force.
Oh, okay.
It is, and I now am wondering if this responsibility will be getting pushed over to the Space Force, because that definitely seems more in their prerogative at this point.
I was gonna say, should that be their job? It's space.
Dan, why does it hurt you? Why does it hurt your head? It's not like it's rocket science. Wait.
It's not rocket surgery.
Satellites.
God. I can't. I look at this and I just think back to how I barely got a B in Calc 2, and I'm like, Taylor series destroyed me. Taylor series made me realize I was not going to be an engineer. I was not going to do anything math related, because that was the most humbling. I put in so much effort and couldn't figure out how to learn it. And I've never ran into that barricade before. I've never been able to not learn something. So when I look at this, it's just intimidating as hell.
As give it enough time, it's not that hard to explain. Actually, orbital mechanics on a basic level aren't that hard to explain. But just to make you feel better, I also hated Taylor's series.
Thank you, God. I'm not alone in that.
Those things are awful. And I also, in pure mathematics, they are used. But as an engineer, nope. I have never run into them.
That makes me feel better. That really does, because that was one of those moments where I was like, oh shoot, this is a brick wall. This is an obstacle I cannot conquer.
Another just side one of just something people may not think about. So we had a launch recently of a very large telescope, the James Webb, and people may be thinking or for anything like the Curiosity or landing or what have you, people are like, movies show us that there's this very exciting thing when data comes back and it just looks perfect. No, it's usually just a graph.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Like, how do we know the orbital insertion burn happened properly? Probably from a graph of, like, the motion.
That's
And
it?
They just see, like, a blip, and that means it worked.
It's a yes/no, like, essentially input.
Kinda, sorta. But
Okay.
it's like
If you squint your brain.
it's like reading them. It's kind of like reading the Matrix. Just like data coming
Zeros and
back
ones.
isn't always like. There's no external camera. We can't be like, oh look, it's now orbiting Mars. No.
Right.
So yeah, a lot
What
of.
happens if you get a no when you should get a yes?
Then you have. Well, that's when you start seeing on like the webcast. And you can tell
Yeah.
something's going wrong. Sometimes because the data's like you can see it in the screen in the background, and they have the data being fed into some sort of simulation that's like showing what, like interpolating it real time. Like I think this
okay.
was on the Bereshit lander. It was, I want to say, Israeli lander that was going to land on the moon. If you looked in the background, it was doing some pretty weird things on their projection of it, and that's, I believe, using their actual data. And then you
Okay.
started seeing engineers get very concerned. So, yeah, some of that is used, but a lot of times, yeah, they're just waiting for stuff to come down. Like, yeah, the James Webb is going to be using a lot of not pretty pictures because it's X-ray. It's
Oh, that's weird.
none of these Hubble images. It's going to be taking measurements. It will have some, but
What's to be gained from that? Because that's cool. I
a
wouldn't have thought that
lot.
would be an application.
A lot. It can look. X-ray is all the high energy stuff. X-ray and beyond. I may be getting that wrong.
No, you're right.
But
X-ray
it's-
and gamma are high energy.
Well, no, that James Webb is doing X-ray specifically.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but
It's mid-infrared. So, yeah, sorry, it won't have X-ray or gamma ray. But still, a lot of those aren't, like, yeah, you can see in it, but it's also just getting readings of the amount of light, not necessarily seeing what that light is producing.
Uh,
So, yeah,
So, okay.
I just
Well,
explained,
that's like new.
I just
updated.
explained how science works.
There you go. What are other things you think that are just like, wow, how the hell is this still done? This is held together by duct tape, essentially.
I mean, so a lot of that stuff, a lot of the crazy stuff that you think about for, like, when you think of being a chemist, people are always like, oh, you're just mixing chemicals. These days, kind of not anymore. Maybe there's some, but, like, back in the 50s, just mixing chemicals is literally how they were trying to make liquid rocket propellants. They were like, well, we know this works, so what happens if we just mix it with this? And then sometimes their lab would explode.
and sometimes they would mouth pipette terrible things.
Yeah,
God.
that too. Just
That's a
there's
practice I can't believe was real.
mouth pipetting.
Thank God that's not still a thing.
would,
but
would we like to explain what that means?
oh, go for it.
Yes, go ahead.
I go for it. I'm
Oh.
not. I'm not.
Okay. In all of our lifetimes, and I don't know about you, Ben, but probably about half of all of like the lab managers, like the senior lab personnel I worked with, basically everybody who I knew who was like 50 and over have all told me that, like, oh yeah, I mouth pipetted before. Basically, if you're at all familiar with pipettes, it's just these big long plastic tubes. You usually have like a bulb or some kind of instrument.
It's like a
at the top
turkey
of it.
baster.
Kind of like that. Yeah.
Yeah, like a mini turkey baster. That's perfect.
And you press something or you squeeze the bulb and then you release it and it'll pull things up into the stem. You're fine. Well, for some reason, back in the day, they used to just have long glass pipettes, and sometimes they would remember to put like a little cotton filter at the top, and you would put your mouth over the top end of the pipette, and you would stick it into whatever chemical you would then want to pipette, and you would just pull it with your breath. You would breathe in, you would pull and draw up liquid into the pipette, and then probably like stick your tongue up against the the glass part of the pipette and hold it, and then you would just release it so you could drop the liquid into another container. Now you can obviously see how like if someone pulled too hard or like accidentally inhaled something horrifying, how that could be.
Oh, there's no toxic fumes. There's nothing that could go wrong
Yeah,
there.
it's perfectly safe, you know.
Yeah, kind of like siphoning gas. Same concept.
Like,
Yeah,
right?
I was actually going to say the same thing.
Mouth pipetting was done until 1970s. What?
I mean, probably up
No.
until the 1990s, dude. I mean, I knew
I
people
was gonna
who were in their
say-
50s now who did it.
Officially,
reading this.
maybe, but unofficially, oh no, that shit still happened.
Well,
I mean,
that's like
yeah.
one of those things where it's like if you can find an old school doc. Like if I were to talk about medical practice, where you're like, what is something that people still do that is not necessarily discouraged? You know, you guys have how prostate exams work, right? You know, the good old digital rectal exam. We have MRI, CT scans, all these things that can qualify and quantify. And still to this day, there are doctors who would tell you, nope, it's a routine physical. You got to drop your drawers.
Pull the pants down.
There's nothing else I can do. I'm like, yeah, there is. There's a blood test now for it. It's actually not recommended for screening.
Wow.
And I just tell this like 60-year-old doctor who's like, I've done that every patient since I was a resident.
And now I have a fetish for it. And damn it.
The only reason that doctor did that was because in his state it was illegal to say he was a priest.
Oh God! Oh God! I just think it's one of those things. It's like person walks in, they've hurt their knee. He's like, "All right, well now we got to do your routine prostate checks." What? I'm here for my knee. That is nothing, sir. I'm a doctor. I'm a professional. I'm reading this though about mouth pipetting, and so is pipetting by mouth acceptable?
No.
Bold, underline, italicized. Do not ever use your mouth to pull a liquid into a pipette.
Yep.
This is the single most common method of becoming poisoned in a chemical laboratory or becoming infected in a clinical laboratory.
Yep.
Oh my God. Oh, hello, hepatitis.
Go figure that putting your mouth on things was not a good idea.
Tell that to my 1-year-old. So, okay. Sorry, Ben. I completely derailed this conversation.
Okay, I do have one more that this is slightly nerdy, because we were talking about units earlier. All right,
Yeah.
so I will fully admit, I'm an engineer, and I do not know and will never care how many feet are in a mile. I just don't care.
5,280 feet. You pick up that ball and you run every one of them. Sorry. Remember the Titans holds a special place in my heart.
I mean,
And,
to be fair, rent is how I know how many minutes are in a year, so...
Oh my God. Denzel Washington yelling at Turk from Scrubs will live in my heart forever. I'm sorry. I just had to get that in there. Go ahead.
So NASA, when you see NASA launch a rocket, they will use, or if you see SpaceX launch a rocket, they use kilometers. Basically, like, I can tell you what orbital velocity is in kilometers. It's around the Earth, it's more or less 7 kilometers per second. United Launch Alliance, which is the other big, one of the other big launch providers, uses not miles, nautical miles.
Wait, what?
I think I've actually talked about this in a different episode. They use nautical miles as their measurement. This is an article from May of this year. The Atlas V rocket will deliver Boeing Starliner spacecraft to a 98 nautical mile suborbital trajectory.
But why?
I do not know.
But, like, isn't a nautical mile longer than a regular mile?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for those who don't know, nautical miles and regular miles aren't even the same thing. Nautical miles are based on latitude. It's based on something specifically for, like, going over the surface of the Earth. Like in
Okay.
a ship, hence nautical.
Right.
Airplanes also use knots, but that's a different story. They actually do go over the surface of the Earth. But for altitude and such, ULA uses nautical miles. And if I couldn't tell you what orbital velocity is in miles, I don't even, yeah.
So a nautical mile is 1.5 1 normal miles. What the hell?
Yes.
So it makes more sense if it's more rooted in like latitude and longitude, because those aren't lines of latitude and longitude the major ones, like divisions of time zones and whatnot.
Kind of, but they're using it for altitude.
Ah, okay, gotcha. I see where you're going. I'm tracking. I just have like 1,000 thoughts going on that none of them are making sense right now.
Oh, don't worry, this doesn't make sense to me either. But yeah, that's all about that.
It's probably just because I can't read.
Not knocking on ULA. I love ULA. Why?
Well, when you talk about standardization, even in medicine, a lot of people would be like, well, this is the standard practice. This is what we do. And there will still be people like, nah. That's why it's practicing medicine. But that's a good segue to PJ. PJ, you work in retail pharmacy. You run a drive-through, which kind of blows my mind. What in your day-to-day life do you just go, you scratch your head and you're like, why am I still doing this? Or how the hell is that a thing? Or even scripts, I'm guessing you get that are just like, who wrote this?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I just thought of one as Ben was talking. Like, there's stuff for thyroid stuff. They'll still use grains, and I'm like, what? Why? Don't do this to me again.
They'll use what?
Grains. Like, it'll be like
grains.
Yeah, it'll be like giving me like NP thyroid, like 1.5 grain. I'm like, okay.
What does that mean?
It's approximately 30 milligrams for 1 grain, but it gets really confusing.
Is grains the same measurement that they used for gunpowder back in the day, or is that a different grain?
Probably the same one.
Of course.
Well, if it's approximately 30 mLs, that's essentially an ounce, right? So is it a weight or is it a volume measurement?
It's a weight. It's like 30 milligrams.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said milliliters. I'm just dealing with a baby and breast milk all day, so that's where my mind went. That's weird. I didn't know that was a thing. Didn't know the apothecary was working down the street filling prescriptions. What the fuck? Okay.
So the part where it gets really confusing is grain is GR, which grams is G.
G.
But most people still use GR. And it gets, that's always fun.
Cool.
Oh my god. Pick the normal weight measurement. What the hell?
Right? Like, thankfully, most places will write both now, but every once in a while, I'll get a script that just says grain. I'm like, don't do this.
Are there any other weird ones? Because I'm sure you get tons.
So there's always the tincture of opium script I get, like once every 6 months.
I'm sorry, tincture?
Tincture of opium, yep.
What?
We've actually dispensed it, I think. We had a special order. Somebody was really, really constipated. Nothing else worked. And the doctor's like, give him tincture of opium. I'm like, okay.
I'm sorry. What is a tincture? I know I've heard the word, but I don't actually know what that means.
It's some equivalent of natural extract. Because it's like raw opium or equivalent of or something like that. I don't know if they manufacture it now. But it's based off the natural equivalent you'd get from like a poppy seed.
Oh, weird. What the hell? Wait, opium slows down your bowels, and this was for constipation?
Or other way around. Like they were.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
got it.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So, I was like, man, the doctor really hates that patient. They really don't. They really don't want him to poop.
Never again.
And then like paper prescriptions. I'm like, why? Like, I get it. Like, as a backup, or so sometimes you just have to do a paper prescription. But I'm like, I can't read this.
I will say, in working in the 21st century with electronic medical records and being able to send people's scripts electronically to their pharmacy, I work in essentially active adult community, a retirement community. So I take care of, as a sports medicine doctor, I probably take care of 80 to 85% retirees who want to remain active or just have musculoskeletal problems. I mean, the thing about sports medicine is the other side of the coin is all of our joints wear down. So that's actually the majority of my patients. I still get 60, 70, 80-year-olds who are just like, well, where's my script? I'm like, oh, the medicine's at the pharmacy. And they're like, oh, wow, technology. That's amazing. I'm like, yeah, it'll be there when you get there. How will they know? You just tell them your name. Like, it's kind of this like new discovery every time. And, it's fun working in God's waiting room. So I enjoy it. Oh god, I feel bad saying that, but it's kind of true. I will say on the other side of things, I have a paper script pad. The only context I will argue for paper scripts is just when you're in a location where electronic scripts are not feasible. So for me, in my field, it's when I'm at sporting events and I want a patient to get a particular type of x-ray. and I don't want the 14-year-old to have to translate what I said to a radiology technologist, so I have to write on a paper script exactly what I want. That's the time it's most advantage for me. And that's probably the only... I don't think I've ever written a paper script for a medication since our electronic medical record went down one day for an hour, because then my life fell apart, and I don't know how doctors did what they do now.
That is terrifying.
Oh my god, it was awful. I just felt like someone cut off my hands and was like, all right, now go do your job. I was like, what? But how? I trained this way. I don't know how to do it this way. But yeah, PJ, I will say paper scripts are a very archaic thing, so I'm surprised you get so many.
I mean, not many, but we still had a decent amount. And like my only recommendation, not that doctors are listening to this, I assume, who knows?
All two of them.
At least
Right.
one is.
That's true. But he's already on board with not writing stuff. Is to like write it on like a template and just sign it. You know what I mean? Like at least that way I can read what it is.
Oh my god, yeah. How often do you have to call because you have to decipher handwriting? Because that is the perfect, how is this still a thing? Like, I have god-awful handwriting. But if I'm going to write something important, then I'm going to write it well.
I still have to call on stuff at least once a day. Easily.
Oh my god.
Once a day?
And we just don't have the time or manpower to do it right now. We don't. So
Yeah. People, this is why your scripts take forever. It's not just putting pills in a bottle. It's because your doctor wrote something illegible and we have to call him amid his busy day and stop him and get him to say what the hell he actually wants. That's why it's taking 30 minutes.
And then by far, like when I call, like the nurse or assistant or MA, whoever will answer the phone, and I'm like, hey, I can't read this. So they'll go get a copy. Like, hey, yeah, I've got a copy of it right here. I'm like, okay. They're looking at it. I'm like, they're like, I can't read this either.
Oh, good. You're not an idiot who can't read. It's just that this is illegible, like you said. Oh, that's great. I love the idea of a nurse or a medical assistant just being like, oh shit, yeah, this is a hieroglyph. I don't know what this is. What about technology-wise, or just like day-to-day stuff? Because I don't actually even know what, the infrastructure of your job looks like a lot. Because the things where you're like, man, how is this not automated, or anything like that?
I mean, a lot of it's getting there, but it's like we still have like old computers at the end window. There's like a scanner at every, at every computer station, whatever.
You aren't using dial-up, are you?
Sometimes it feels like it, but no. Not usually.
It doesn't make noise, but it takes just as long.
But like, honestly, the most annoying thing for me is counting out like 500 metformin. I'm like, again? But,
oh God, you think it'd come in a dispenser that could just do that for you?
Right, or at least for the high volume stuff. We used to be able to weigh them, but some weird thing that we can't do that anymore. So we actually have to like physically count everything.
About to ask why you couldn't just weigh them.
Yeah, because they're all a set weight. So what? All right, there's a story there. Do you know why?
I don't know the whole story. I've heard bits and pieces. I think something happened with some kind of legal issue, and the manufacturer is basically like, we can say that there's 90 in the bottle or whatever it is, but we can't like 100% verify with you like that each one weighs the same. So
That's
that if
crazy.
if there's a discrepancy, it's on you, it's not on us. Something along those lines.
Oh, they just have better lobbyists. Why the hell do pharmacists not have better lobbyists? I swear to God.
They're all busy counting out 500 pills.
Exactly.
Y'all are too busy counting by fives to 500. That's, oh my goodness. That's hilarious, and something that just makes me appreciate the little things I don't have to deal with. Because I'm shocked that's... Do you have techs who do that, or do you have to do the counting?
We're so short right now. Like I've had to do a few of them now, but like usually it's them.
Okay. So it's not necessarily your busiest part of your day. I know I joke and I make fun, and obviously I have tons of pharmacy friends and I hold them in high regard. I don't mean to say, because I'm sure you hear this and that they hear this all the time of the awful comments of like, how could it take so long? You got your online degree, just count by fives. Why is it taking so long?
Right. Or
I say it to poke fun, but good God.
Yeah, or it's like just go stick a label on it. Like after Labor Day, we literally had 180 prescriptions on the counter, and I'm like, which label do you want me to stick on first? Like, there's 180 people ahead of you. Sorry, hang out.
Well, that's the crazy part too, is because I've talked about sports physicals a bit, and people will be like, okay, I think we already recorded a little tidbit of this that'll probably go into next week's episode. I do a sports physical. If I'm good at my job and all of the paperwork is already filled out correctly, it takes me maybe 5 to 10 minutes at most. But when you start talking about mass physical events, you're talking about 200 plus kids. If you think of any aspect of your job that takes 5 minutes and then you go, okay, now do that 200 times, obviously it's going to take forever.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess my moral of this and my outrage is like, be patient with your pharmacists. They're probably working incredibly hard and very like you said, understaffed, undersupported. And given what you have told me, what Ramon has told me, what some of my other pharmacist friends have told me, that's not changing anytime soon.
No, it's not.
I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry you had to go through that. That's a lot.
It's okay. It's my job. So, yeah, we do what we got to do.
I think we've been recording for a good amount of time. Does anybody have any last minute, like how is this still a thing? Or even questions about other people's jobs of like, how the hell do you do this part? Or how the hell is this still part of your day-to-day?
Yeah, Alex mentioned... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just reading up on grains. It's a doozy.
Oh, God. What was your question, PJ? It sounded like it was for Alex.
Well, Alex mentioned camels earlier, and it made me think of a story. So back home, there's a rule that says you can't have driver's ed and sex ed on the same day. And I asked why, and it was because I was told the camels would get really tired.
Story. God bless.
Oh my God.
Oh, that's great. God, PJ. Sometimes like you don't talk too much, but when you do, it's gold. No, this was great. This was a fun episode. I feel like we touched on, a lot of like interesting and just cool things, and then being able to answer certain questions, but then also poke fun at each other's profession. So that being said, thank you for joining me, guys. This is a ton of fun. I look forward to this every week. This is just so much, it's just so much fun to just shoot the breeze with you guys. And thank you, listeners, for listening in. We appreciate your support, appreciate your attention. We know, whether it's your drive or relax time, listening in is your time, which is valuable, and listening to us supports us. If you haven't already, follow on whatever major podcast platform you do. We put out episodes every Sunday. Download the episodes, give them a listen. That's the way you can support us and help us continue to do what we do. Thank you again, and until next week, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.